Okay, I've got us right at 11:30 Eastern time, so let's go ahead and get started. I see a nice crowd still logging in. Welcome everyone, hello. Thanks for joining us today for our first Power Up of the year. And this one is on sourcing strategies. My name is Thomas Meredith, Vice President of Marketing, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. And also joining us today will be Randy Mislovic, RMI Managing Director. We are scheduled for 30 minutes today for this Power Up, so I won't take up too much time at the top here, but let me tell you, we are recording the session and we'll get a link to that recording sent out later today. We've also made a PDF copy of the deck available in your GoToWebinar panel if you wanted to download that. And of course, we will have a Q&A session at the conclusion of the presentation. And if you've been on any of our Power-Ups over the last few years, we do not stop the session to answer questions, but feel free to enter them in the GoToWebinar panel. We'll pull those together for a session at the end. Okay, let me step aside here and welcome RMI Managing Director Randy Mislovic to present today's webcast. Randy, welcome. It's all yours.
Perfect. Great. Tom, so I'll do a quick sound check. I sound okay?
Audio sounds great.
Okay, perfect. Great. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us for our first Power Up broadcast of 2020. Welcome, everyone. I want to take a moment and a special thanks and shout out to our sponsors for this Power Up event, Keyed In and MavenLink. We appreciate their sponsorship of resource of the RMI and this broadcast, and I appreciate their interest in helping us to improve what the industry is trying to accomplish relative to the resource management discipline. So thanks again to our sponsors. And this is a great topic, really timely sourcing strategies. I can't wait to dive into it. I'll do a quick commercial for those of you who are joining us for the first time. The RMI is an institute dedicated to the advancement of resource and workforce management thought leadership, best practices, and standards. We will be celebrating our 4th year as an institute here the middle of this year, and in our 6th year, and actually in providing certification training in resource management. You know, the outcomes of better resource management lead to better project performance, resource utilization, customer sat, and improve employee engagement and retention, and you know, all really good reasons why we should all be paying attention to improving how we do at resource management. And the Institute tries to help all of you, our members, by best practice definition, market research and white papers. There's a great library of those things out on our website. We have a world-class certification program in resource management, as well as a number of other resource management courses that are available in a variety of formats. And then we also run various events like this, and our symposium, which I'll highlight at the end of the broadcast, we do annually. We focus on project-based domains, and in particular, organizations that are in professional consulting services, enterprise IT for internal IT departments, product development groups, and marketing agencies are 4 focus areas. But anybody doing project-based work can benefit from a collaboration with the Resource Management Institute. If you haven't been to our website, I encourage you to do that. The great news about the RMI is you can join, become a member for free. It gets you behind the firewall, so you can get access to our white papers, our market research, and other things that are valuable to you, to include opportunities to collaborate at events like this. We've got forum tools and things to help you interact with the other members, innovation opportunities through our market research and white papers and things, again, that are available in the library. And for our certification students, they get access to a special toolkit that's available through the website. And then lastly, there's opportunities to attend, get educated through our certification program or our annual symposium, which is coming up in September in Dallas, and then there are a number of other courses we do. So anyway, that's a brief commercial on the RMI if you're not familiar with us. So, sourcing strategies, this is, we did the RMI did a research study in the 4th quarter of last year, and to our knowledge, it's the first of its kind, where we did an in-depth look at how organizations are planning for how they're going to source people how they're going about it, things that are getting in the way, things that are working well, et cetera. And we're going to build on that data over time. And in this broadcast, I'm going to share not only a little bit of that data. That research report, by the way, is available again to our members, downloadable from the website. We just released it maybe a week or two ago. But I'm going to share some of that data, and I'm also going to share some best practices that hopefully will be helpful tips and techniques for the people attending this broadcast as it relates to sourcing. So in the survey that we just finished, one of the key questions we asked was, are you having, what's the status of finding available talent? And so I guess, good news, bad news is that there were just about everybody is having some challenges or worse relative to finding people. Only 5% with no issues, and 35% find it difficult or very difficult. So we know this is a hot topic. It's a tight job market right now, and this has always been a challenging area, but right now I'll just say it's exacerbated by the state of the economy and the tightness of the job market. So organizations are really pulling out the stops relative to how they're trying to source talent and to include traditional methods of employee recruiting and hiring and use of third parties, which we're going to talk more about. But interdepartmental borrowing and escalation and reprioritization, certainly things people have been doing for a long time. But organizations we're seeing are doing more of this as they are finding availability of talent more difficult to find. So this is kind of a backdrop of the data from our latest survey that says, okay, well, if you're having trouble with sourcing, you're not alone, and everybody's looking for ways to do it better. I'm hoping to share some of those things with us. So I'm going to focus on 4 things that the RMI would suggest. Sourcing is a big area. There's a lot of things that goes with it. It's employment, it's contractors, it's rates, it's onboarding. How do you do training? Offshoring, onshoring. How do you work with the recruiting firms? There's a lot to this area. So we're going to pick at just 4 things today that we think will be helpful tips and techniques for all of you. And the RMI is going to focus on this area of sourcing going forward and build on this data that we've got. And by the way, at our symposium, we're going to have some topical things on that as well. So come join us in Dallas in September. So 4 things I'm going to talk about today. First of all, just having a sourcing strategy, and I'll come back to that. Getting your mix of employees versus third parties right. How do you develop the right kind of a peak load plan for your organization? An innovative way to go about finding people is, we call warm pool recruiting. We teach this in our certification program, but I want to come back and highlight a little bit about what that means and how it works if you're not doing that already. And then lastly is using technology to automate your this process of sourcing, identifying your gaps and helping you with that process. So I'll start with the sourcing strategy piece of this, and it probably sounds kind of motherhood and apple pie, mom and apple kind of stuff, but a lot of organizations don't have a sourcing strategy. Now, part of the polling data did say the good news is the majority of firms have one. How complete they are and how in-depth they are and how effective they are, we don't really have data to evaluate that. So the good news is organizations have sourcing strategies. How good they are, I don't really know. But when we talk about sourcing and development in our certification program, we tie that to those decisions that are regarding human capital that are integrated into a process of estimating your demand, looking at your backlog, looking at delivery capabilities that you do have, how you're going to project manage these things. And then really important is recruiting should be a strategic function of the organization versus tactical. We see that too often. It's a reactionary environment as opposed to something that's really been thought through, because in the end is project-based work. It's people that make the difference for success or failure. So you want to be great at this. And then certainly talent management and retention program that focuses on talent and training and compensation, those sorts of things. In our certification program, we focus on this thing called just-in-time resourcing, and the whole idea is, how do you have available talent, not before you need it, not after you need it, but when you need it. And so this, little simple graph here basically says, in the end, is being able to staff your projects quickly is really, really important, right? Nobody likes to wait. Customers want to get going. Sales makes a sale, or in an internal organization, enterprise IT or product development, we've got an internal need and the CEO wants it started, yesterday kind of thing. We want to be in a position to be able to field resources to run our projects and do them quickly. And so we think about this whole idea of a good strategy leads to your ability to do staffing and staff and start projects with competent people on time in 1 to 5 days. And by the way, still have high utilization, still keep your costs down, those sorts of things. And if you're at the other end of that spectrum, 4 weeks or out, there's probably room for improvement in the organization. So at a high level, we're looking for something like that. And then would love to see organizations have a picture. It basically says, okay, for those things that are coming up in 0 to 30 days versus those things that are more than 30 days out, I have, internal sources of where I can find talent, and I've got external sources of where I can find talent. And each of those boxes, whether it's, internal search or your, talent development, or you're out, looking for people externally, warm pool recruiting, your contractors, behind every one of those boxes, there should be a plan as to what that is, how we are going to execute that piece of it. And then I've got a multifaceted sourcing plan for my organization that deals with both things that I can do internally within my own group and those things where I need to reach outside of my organization for help and people. So think of this as just a simple example on a page, a picture, so that you can communicate and have your strategy, communicate the organization, continuously getting better at it, and that you have a strategy like this somewhere in the organization. And by the way, one of the things that we found from some of our earlier surveys is that we are strongly encouraging is recruiting and sourcing. When I started my career, was exclusively the domain of HR. Today, things have changed a lot, and the service delivery organizations, if they're not already very involved, should be very involved in this whole process of determining how you're going to go about doing this, because you're, in the end, the service organizations are the ones that have to execute. So, okay, tip number 2, I want to talk about getting a mix of employees versus third parties right. So some really fascinating data that came out of this research is the organizations that are here that took the survey, by the way, those organizations largely were out of all project-based businesses and 4 domains that we have breakouts of this data for: professional consulting services, enterprise IT, product development, and marketing agencies. We have breakouts of this data for those. You can see what that looks like. But as a whole, a consolidated view of the data basically said, here's a range of what % of your workforce is being done with third parties. And interesting enough, when we, in the best practice that the RMI teaches and certification, if you should be in the 5 to 20% range, and every business is going to be a little bit different. And I won't say that there's never a reason why you shouldn't have a number higher than that. But if you're up at 25, 26% or higher, I would submit to you that most of the time there's opportunities to optimize your use of third parties, drive your costs down, and become more efficient and effective. And then, by the way, we also think that the opposite end of the spectrum is that having no third parties, so that 5%, I would ask the question, why are we not using any third parties? Are we overinvested in our employee base? Again, I'd say the same thing for people that are under 5%. Usually we find that there's some opportunities for optimization or cost optimization in the organization. So when we are working with an organization or advising them on how to do this in our certification program, we teach this slide right out of the certification course. Is we just simply talk about peak load management, and in its simplest form, it's drawing a cut line of on the average, how many employees can you keep largely fully utilized through the course of the next 12 months, and then dealing with your peak load in some other method, some other sources, either partners, contractors, vendors, or whatever. And as I mentioned on a prior slide, typically that's 5 to 20% of your total population. And again, I know there's outliers where it may make perfect sense to be outside that range, but most of the time when you're outside that range, there's opportunities to find optimization and save money. Generally when you reach for a contractor, you're reaching for a generally more costly resource. And so anyway, so this whole idea of peak load management is really, really important, and not enough organizations really are that, I'll say, sophisticated enough around how they're really thinking about this. And if you are doing it, great. You're ahead of the game, and that's a really important part of what you do. Okay, third thing I want to talk about, warm pool recruiting. So this is an idea that I actually implemented in my prior employer. I had an opportunity to grow an organization from 1 person to 1,600 people in just 3 years. And so we were doing lots of hiring, training, onboarding, looking at our mix of how we were doing things. And since then, I've really refined this whole notion of what we now call warm pool recruiting. And I want to talk about what that is and how it works. When we asked in the survey, how are you going about finding people? So we found, internal hiring and internet sources, LinkedIn, Indeed, those kinds of sources were leading the pack relative to primary sources. And by the way, those are good things, and I'm glad people are doing that. That those things hopefully are working for them. And then the secondary sources, I think the two that were in the lead were recruiting firms and use of offshore resources stood out as other sources for where people were finding talent. So just some data so you can kind of benchmark yourself against other organizations and how they're finding people. I thought that'd be helpful. And again, this data is broken down by those 4 different domains I mentioned. Also really interesting is that, how long does it take you to recruit and onboard employees? From the start of that process to the first day that person is productive. And, probably not a surprise, but, other than 8% of you, 92% of you take at least 31 days, and 47% take 61 days or longer. And so, if you have immediate project needs and you're out of resources, that's not a good story. And the whole notion, again, of just-in-time resourcing is never finding yourself in that position where, okay, I got a project, I need to staff it, and I don't know where the people are going to come from. Driving you toward, I always have the funnel, I know where those people are going to come from, and I can pull the switch and make that happen. That's the nirvana where we want to get people with just-in-time resourcing. But the whole notion of what this data tells us is you got to be out in front of this. So if it takes 61 days or longer for 47% of you, and you got short time frames to staff projects, you really got to work on a more proactive model to feed the service machine. Which is, by the way, the reason that so many organizations reach to third-party resources. And so, the good news is you can find them quickly. Well, that's the business model of those organizations. You need people, I got them. Generally I can get them in 60 days or less in most cases. And there are some unique skill sets and things that sometimes take a bit longer than that. But again, when organizations reach to third parties, if you've optimized, there are sometimes very good reasons to reach for those third parties. But if you're one of those people that have got 30, 40, 50% of your resources coming from third parties, which are generally more expensive, then you probably have room for optimizing your organization. So what we try to do is to feed this whole idea of just-in-time. The way warm pool recruiting works, and I'll just use my own example. I took my managers and said, okay, we're going to pick 4 cities where we know the kind of talent we're looking for is where we can find it. And every month we're going to run recruiting activities in those cities with targeted profiles, and we're going to be, doing that based on us looking at our forecast capacity plan, intertwining that with what we're getting through our recruiting plan, what we're doing for internal training, those kind of things, anticipation of projects that are coming down the pike. But we were always out there recruiting people, but stopping short of actually hiring them, so that the moment we know we had a need, we knew exactly where we could go to our warm pool list of people. And I get it that, since you didn't hire them, I'd say you reeled them up and got them interested. And some of these people will roll off and move on to other things. But the good news is you always have a rolling list of people where where I can go start to go find potential resources. And you tell these people up front that the whole idea of warm pooling is that I'm building this warm pool of people that are keeping them warm. And by the way, I'm following back up with these people. Are you still, still available? Are you still interested, kind of thing, in doing that? So, and I saw a question in the question box, by the way, is, what's the definition of warm pooling? And it's right there on the slide now for you. So anyway, all right, so that's warm pooling. So that's the third thing I wanted to share. And the last is technology. Is to automate your processes. So most organizations have PPM or PSA tool or an RPM tool or something homegrown, or they're using spreadsheets or something to identify their gaps and help them with this. What should I be doing? But interesting enough, and not a surprise to us, is 55% of you said my tool's not getting me there. And I hope those organizations are all in the market looking for how I'm going to improve the tool that I have, or look for a new tool, or supplement it with something else. But this is really important to have. Automation can just take you a long way toward improving this process. And so just some key things we would encourage you to be thinking about or looking at if you're looking for a new tool is its ability to do what-if projections. What's my sourcing needs look like 3 months from now, 2 months from now, 4 months from now? Again, remembering that it takes 2, 3, 4 months to get people, find them, onboard them, make them productive. You all know that. So having a what-if projection and getting that to be more precise over time, really important. The ability to handle multiple categories. Some systems, I say, handle employees well. They don't integrate third parties quite so well. So that's a really important part. If you believe in the people-led strategy idea, that's a really important part of your technology needs. Thinking right from the get-go, how do I get off spreadsheets? Some of our other research on tools says organizations are spending all this money, but yet they're still married on modern automation tools. They're still married to spreadsheets. And I would submit to you, you just didn't think through enough how you were going to get off the spreadsheets, or maybe you picked the wrong tool, or you implemented it wrong, or whatever it happens to be. But really be thinking through the idea of how do I minimize spreadsheet dependency. And of course, data analysis, reporting, dashboarding are really, really important here. So get yourself a good automation tool. And so our sponsors, Akita and Maven Link, would be a good place to start as examples of tool vendors, and there's certainly others out there. But get yourself a modern tool that helps with this process. So anyway, those are 4 tips and techniques that we know are tried and proven in the marketplace. Would encourage you to think about your organizations and seeing if you're doing those things well, and if you're not, give those things a whirl. I'm going to move on and take some questions from the group here. I'll be watching the question box here. I did want to just take a couple of minutes and tell you a couple of things that are coming up. For those of you not familiar with the certification program, it's what's called the RMCP program. It gives you opportunity to learn best practice, gain access to the toolkit, and collaborate with your peers. We know people that have started relationships through this certification program that have gone on now for the whole 6 years, and some that we've been offering this program. And the program, you can consume it lots of different ways. You can come to class here in Cincinnati. We do private classes at your location if you want. We have an online live instructor course. We got one that's been going on. We had one this morning, as a matter of fact, that was going on that we run at a time that hits a lot of different time zones. And we now have an on-demand version of that, so you can sign up for this thing for $70 by $25. And when you finish, you have a certification exam. There's a recertification process. And by the way, if you're a PMP, through the PMI, you get PDUs for taking this certification course. And so for those of you in PMPs, it's just an added benefit of going through this. We teach just-in-time resourcing, our solution, and these 6 things around skills, staffing, forecasting, sourcing, technology, tools, and governance as a part of that certification training that we do. If you're interested, you can go to the website and look on the page where we have the programs out there and available. Cincinnati next class coming up in April, and there are, by the way, early bird pricing on these if you get in early enough. And we're going to London in May for a class. So if you're there, Western Eastern Europe, they've made it a little bit more convenient for you if you're interested in the in-class version. Next online version starts in May. There is one that's going on right now. It's probably a little too late to join that one, but one coming up in May. And of course, the on-demand version is available 7x24 from through our website. If you haven't been to our symposium, we've run 2 so far. Our 3rd annual symposium is coming up in Dallas, September 24th and 25th. We've got great practical topics and speakers, case studies, and we cover topics specific to the project-based domains, which again are professional consulting services, enterprise IT organizations, product development, marketing agencies. And I'll just say again, anybody that does project-based work can benefit from what goes on through the organization. We, by the way, lots of opportunity for networking, and we'll have a whole bunch of PPM, PSA vendors. We had 8 last year there. We hope I'll have more this year doing demonstrations. And so, you know, if you're looking for a tool for resource management, what a great opportunity to get education on ARM processes and see some of the best technology for resource management available to you. So right before I start my Q&A session, I just want to thank Keyed In and Maven Link again for their sponsorship. Those are the links to their websites, and encourage you to go check them out. And I thank them again for the sponsorship. The next Power Up, by the way, is coming up June 17th. It's on 5 ways resource management will bring business value to your organization. So don't miss that one. It's going to be great. We're going to have some great new content with some new market research data to support our contentions, and that is, as we always do in these. So I'm going to take some questions here in the remaining couple of minutes I got. I've got one in the panel. Says, would you still apply a 2080 utilization calculation to external contractors? So, generally you can. My simple point is depends on how you contract with them. If I was buying a contractor on a monthly basis and it's my job to put them to work, I definitely would have them based on a 2080 utilization thing. Those people are going to still want to take vacations. They're going to get sick, and so you're not going to get full utilization. My preference always when I'm using third parties is to buy them by the drink, and therefore the utilization for me is always 100% because I'm not paying for them unless I'm using them. And so that's kind of where I would be with that. I had another question that came in as well. I'll just read this one. Don't you risk getting people interested in warm pool recruiting and then not hiring them? And I'll just say the short answer is, I did this, in my old job for 3 years, and that never became an issue. And, simply I just say no. As long as you're upfront and honest with these people, look, you're trying to find availability resources for people to fit the need. Today's new generations are more openly and active about how they're interacting with the job market. But it's getting that warm pool and having that list and knowing where I can go to get people when I need them is really, really important to feed a just-in-time environment. And so I would really, really encourage you to think about that. Give it a try if you're not doing it. And by the way, if you find other ways you think are interesting and working for you that I haven't talked about, we're always interested in new ideas, and you can send us your thoughts or ideas to info@resourcemanagementinstitute.com or any other questions. And we got somebody who monitors that email, and we'll do our best to answer whatever questions that you might have. I'll conclude here again just to tell people just watching the panel, see if there are any other questions that come in. Again, June 17th, our next Power Up in 5 ways resource management brings business value. Check out the symposium coming up September 24th and 25th. If you're an RMCP already, by the way, we have introduced a new advanced RM course that we're going to run the day prior in Dallas, just prior to the symposium there in the hotel. And we were already sold out half the seats for that. So if you're interested in the advanced RM course, there's information on it out on the website. And we got a bundled deal for that and the symposium. So with that, Thomas, I think we're right at the top of the hour, I believe. And I do have one other question here. I see, did the third-party data include only time and material, also fixed fee service-based resources? So the short answer is, yeah, any third party you're using, if it's not your employee, it's a third party, and whether or not they're time and material or fixed fee. I again, as fixed fee is a little bit easier in that you know what you're getting for your price. Time and materials is what my point earlier was, paying by the drink. I only like using partners when I know I'm actually putting them to work with another customer that's paying me for that work, or some investment thing that I'm trying to do. So anyway, with that, I think we're right at the top of the hour, Thomas. I'm gonna let us go.
Yeah,
here.
thank you,
So
Randy.
Appreciate
Appreciate your time today, Randy, and I want to thank everyone again for joining us for today's Power Up session. Again, Randy mentioned our next one is in June, so be on the lookout in your inbox and on our website for more information and to register for 5 Ways Resource Management Brings Business Value. And with that, we'll close today's webcast. Thanks, Randy. Thanks, everyone.